Hey y'all, welcome back. Today I'm going to be restarting my Living as a Modern Pagan series, and I will be discussing how I have lived as a pagan with other people other than my parents. So like roommates, stuff like that, significant others, what have you. When I first moved out of my parents' house, I lived in a dorm situation, and I had about 3 different roommates during that time, and pretty much all 3 of them didn't really care. What I did was I had a dresser, and on that dresser, part of it I reserved specifically for my Morgan statue, a crystal, and a LED candle. And that's what I had as an altar setup for the entirety of when I lived in the dorms. Now, when I moved out and moved in with one of my partners, she did not care. She was like, whatever, you do you. At one point, I even had, and you'll see in my past videos, I had my own little like witchy room set up going for a while. And another place where I recorded videos and I edited and I did all of that. And that was wonderful and I loved it. Well, when I moved back in with my parents, it kind of became a little bit more small scaled. And then I moved out of my parents' house again and with my previous roommate. And she also did not care. She was like, you do you, like that's fantastic. She's also kind of more of an alternative religion girl as well. But we had this running joke that if you summon a demon in the apartment, it's your pet, you have to take care of it, type of thing. Because we made jokes about that all the time. But she pretty much didn't care. I had my stuff all over. I pretty much had all of my stuff all over the apartment. She did not care if I had a candle on the stove to represent Hestia. She didn't care if I had a goddess tapestry hanging up in the dining room or anything like that. So that's what I did. And then in my room, I had my altar setup. That's very similar to the one I have going now, except now I'm redecorating it for Yule and all of that fun stuff. It's over here to this side of me. And that was wonderful. However, there have been some there was a not so nice time in my life where I couldn't really have that for a variety of reasons. At one point, I did have a partner who wasn't as accepting of my spirituality as the majority of my partners have been. Now, I was pretty stubborn and probably put my safety at risk a couple of times by being very outwardly, hey, like I'm pagan, I want to have an altar set up to my goddesses and my gods. And it was a very big point of contention in a lot of our relationship because while they weren't religious themselves, their family was very Southern Baptist, and that was a whole deal. Like it was so much that like if we were staying at their house, we went to church every Sunday, twice a day, and on Wednesdays, once a day. It was the whole thing. I do not recommend that. So if you are in a situation like that, make sure you gauge how safe it would be for you to be out and you to display your religious faith to the world. Because if you are not safe, you should not do it. I get that it's hard, and I get that the feeling of not being able to be who you are and to express your religious identity like outwardly, it hurts and it's a struggle, but your safety comes first. Now that we've seen the different living situations you could have while living as a modern pagan, I'm going to go into some of the things that I have personally done to be outwardly open about my religious identity when I had roommates. The first was the dorm situation, and like I mentioned earlier, I had a small little square on my dresser that just had a basic altar. It had or a basic shrine. It's probably more like a shrine than an altar, where I had a LED candle, my statue of Morgan, and then, because I wasn't working with Odin at that point, it was just her, and a small little crystal, and that was it. Now, I probably could have asked them to leave the room so I could have, ritual celebrations on the Sabbats. However, I did not do that. I usually just observed them privately and did something special for myself or did something with friends those days, because I didn't really want to step on any roommate's toes by saying, hey, could you, get out so I can do this? So that's up to you. If you live in a dorm and you feel comfortable with saying to your roommate, being like, hey, would you mind if I had the room to myself during this time so I could, have a ritual, or I could do something like that and I'm not bothering you, then that's perfectly fine, as long as you and your roommate are as well communicative as mine were. Now, when I lived with my former partner, before I got my witchy room, I had just a very basic altar set up in our living room and a small altar set up in our bedroom. And both of those things work really well when you live with someone else, if you have the space. I personally had my regular altar in our bedroom, and then I had my ancestor altar in the living room, because that was an incorporation of the both of us, and I felt like that should be in that space. And I had, of course, my Hestia candle on the stove. I've had that since basically I moved out on my own and not with my parents. Candles on stoves have always been something, though, that has been in my life, so I just kind of stuck with that. Then when I got my witchy room, I tried to incorporate more magical aspects into our daily lives. Like when I would clean, I would make sure that it was like cleansed, and I was bringing good energy into the house, and I was inviting the gods to be like, hey, this is my home, you can come in anytime you would like. And I always had the, candle on the stove. I mentioned that a lot, now that I think about it. Then I had my altar set up in my witchy room by a window, looking out over the small amount of greenery we had. And then on another wall, I had my ancestor altar, and I had a fairy altar on one wall, and I was just exuding my religious personality at that point. And then I had to downsize when I moved back home, and then when I moved out again, I like I said, I had stuff in the kitchen, I had stuff in the living room, I had stuff in the dining room. There was just little bits of paganism all throughout the house, and it was wonderful, and I think it added to the atmosphere around that living situation. And when we left, I made sure to, get rid of all of our energies and cleanse the space for the next tenant so they weren't left with any of our residual stuff, because that would have been rude. And yes, in conclusion, living with roommates is very different than living with your parents, because you have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more autonomy when it comes to your religious faith, as long as you're not encroaching on, their personal space or stepping on their toes or doing something that they would not want you to be doing. Like if any of my roommates would have had a problem with any of the things that I would have done, I would have not done them, because it would be a shared space, and you have to respect their lives as well as they have to respect yours. But for the most part, usually people are okay with it, especially if you're not going into a random roommate situation. Like my most kind of sketchy territory, other than the Southern Baptist relationship, was the college roommates, because my school had this like system where they could randomly put you with someone if you did not have a roommate already in mind, and that could have gotten a little dicey. But it did not, thankfully, and none of my roommates cared. And yeah, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this look as living as a modern pagan, and I look forward to making more videos about this. I'm probably going to film one about living by yourself right after this. So yeah, I look forward to talking to y'all later, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.